Hello, students, and welcome. Have you ever stopped to think about why life just keeps going? Why mango trees give us more mango trees, or why kittens always grow up to look like their cat parents? Well, today, we are going to explore the very basic process that makes all of this happen. And that process is reproduction. So let's dive in.
All right, let's begin with a very fundamental question. Why do living things reproduce? Now, think about this for a moment. It's not a process that an organism needs to stay alive, is it? Not like eating or breathing. An animal or a plant can live its whole life without reproducing, so why do it? You see, while other life processes like nutrition or respiration are all about keeping one single organism alive, reproduction is different. It's not for the individual. It's for something much bigger, the continuation of the species as a whole. Think about it like your own family. You are here because of your parents, and they were here because of their parents, your grandparents. It's this continuous chain of life, generation after generation, that is possible only because of reproduction. It is the reason we see so many organisms of a particular kind, allowing the species to continue living on Earth. So this is a really important distinction to remember. On one side, you have processes that are essential for an individual to stay alive, like eating, breathing, and so on. But on the other side, you have reproduction, which is essential for the species to continue. One is for the self, the other is for the group. Okay, so organisms reproduce to continue their species. But how do they create new individuals that look so much like themselves? A puppy looks like a dog. A mango seed grows into a mango tree. How does this happen? Well, the secret lies in something we can call life's blueprint. The reason is actually quite simple. Organisms of the same species, like lions or tigers or even us humans, look similar because their basic body designs are similar. They share a common plan. And where do these instructions for the body design come from? They come from the blueprint. This blueprint is a molecule called DNA, which stands for deoxyribonucleic acid. You can think of DNA as the complete instruction manual for making an organism. It's the source of information for making proteins, which then build the body. So where is this important blueprint stored? Well, it's kept very safely inside the nucleus of a cell. And inside that nucleus, the long molecules of DNA are neatly packed into structures that we call chromosomes. All right, let's connect the dots. If reproduction is all about making a new individual with a similar body design, then what's the very first, most basic thing that has to happen? Well, you have to copy the blueprint, right? And that's why we say that the most basic, the most fundamental event in reproduction is the creation of a DNA copy. Before anything else, the cell has to make a copy of its instruction manual. Now, this whole process is very organized. First, the cell uses a series of chemical reactions to build a copy of its DNA. Next, it also creates an additional set of all the other parts of the cell, the cellular apparatus. And finally, once everything is ready, the cell divides into two, giving one copy of the DNA and the cellular machinery to each new cell. Okay, so the cell copies its DNA. But this brings up a very important point about the copying process itself. Let's think about it. Are these copies of DNA absolutely identical to the original? Is the process perfect every single time? Well, the answer is no. The truth is, no biochemical reaction is absolutely 100% reliable, and that includes copying DNA. Here's a simple way to imagine it. Suppose I ask you to copy a very long paragraph by hand from a book. You will probably do a very good job, but there's a small chance you might make a tiny spelling mistake somewhere. The same kind of thing happens inside the cell. So what happens because of these small copying mistakes? Well, the result is that the DNA copies are similar, but they are not identical to the original. Now, sometimes these errors can be very drastic, and the new cell might not even survive. But many times they're very small differences, and these subtle differences are what we call variations. These variations are what make the surviving cells a little bit different from each other. So you might be thinking that these variations are just mistakes, but actually they are incredibly important. In fact, these differences are why a species can survive over a long period of time. But why? Why is variation useful for the survival of a species? Let's try to understand this with a simple story. Okay, imagine there is a population of bacteria, and they are living very happily in some temperate water. The conditions are perfect for them. But then the environment changes.
Let's say because of something like global warming, the water temperature suddenly increases. It gets much hotter.
Now, most of the bacteria are not suited for this heat. So what will happen? They will not be able to survive and they will die.
But remember those variations we talked about? What if a few of the bacteria had a variation that made them resistant to heat? Those few variants will be able to survive. And because they survive, they will grow and reproduce, creating a new population that can live in the hotter water. So let's just quickly summarize what we've learned. First, reproduction is what allows a species to continue. For this to happen, the DNA blueprint must be copied. We know this copying process creates small, inbuilt variations. And finally, this variation is very, very useful for the survival of the species over time. Now, this natural tendency for variation is powerful, but it can be quite slow. So this leaves us with one final question to think about. If small variations are so good for survival, are there ways for organisms to create even more variation, maybe even a bit faster? We will explore that in our next session.